How do you progress your exercises in your training program? Well, in this video, I'm going to explain my training philosophy around exercise selection and how I actually view exercises as skills and use volume and intensity to progress that skill. If you'd like to learn more around training and sports science, please give the Progress Theory a subscribe. So I view exercises as skills, and I will choose to use these skills in a training program based on a number of reasons, such as are they generating force through specifically chosen movement patterns? Are they deliberately stressing the active and passive structures, so your muscles, your tendons, for example, deliberately to try and develop certain adaptations such as hypertrophy, tendon stiffness, and their tolerance to stress? However, how I progress these skills follow a particular pattern. If you can see this picture on the screen, you'll be able to see how I see this cycle of skill, volume, and intensity. We have the skill, which I will increase the volume, practicing the skill, and then once I increase the intensity, that changes the skill and the cycle starts again. The reason for this cycle is that skills require practice. Practice of these skills, either through programs, sets and reps, or through creative play, builds up a volume of work. This gives the athlete not only the chance to perform better at the skill through skill learning, but also time for the musculoskeletal system to develop resistance to this training stress, thus increasing its tolerance. Now, once the athlete has had a good volume of practice, I look to increase the intensity. Now, this could be adding greater loads on a barbell, for example, or increasing the height of a box jump or a depth jump, or through increasing the skill complexity. However, how the body handles this increase in intensity will ultimately change the skill. Now, the magnitude of the change may vary based on the increase in intensity that you give or the level of the athlete, but regardless, the skills still change because you've increased the intensity. Now, if we follow the cycle, this means the athlete now has to spend time practicing this new skill. So they build up the volume with this new skill so they can adapt to the training stress. Now, I'll give you an example with a depth jump. So, for example, someone jumping off a box and then landing on the floor and then jumping up as soon as they land on the floor. If I change the box height from 30 centimeters to 40 centimeters, that will change the skill because the athlete now needs new levels of eccentric strength to be able to deal with increased forces that happen when they land. So if we introduce this depth jump with an increased box height, the athlete now needs to spend time practicing that new skill, and thus it will increase their training volume at that particular skill so they can adapt to this new increased training stress. And they need that volume before we then increase the box height further. Now, this training philosophy has developed through my experience of going through different return to play protocols, particularly for ACL reconstructions. What I was seeing was a lot of coaches, they would train a new skill, and then as soon as the athlete could perform that skill, they go, great, let's move on to the next one. So they then increase the intensity in some form. There was no chance to develop volume at that particular skill, develop adaptations, develop a certain tolerance to that training stress before then progressing. Ultimately, they were going through the return to play protocol way too quickly. They were increasing the intensity before they necessarily had to, or before the athlete was ready. However, I should make it very clear that I don't program one level of intensity and therefore like one skill for each athlete in a training program, particularly for healthy athletes. And let me explain. Take a weightlifter, for example, who's performing the snatch during a training week. Their training week may consist of sets at 70 to 80% of their 1RM, mainly focused around developing the skill. But in another session, they may go up to around 90% of their 1RM. Both of these are very separate skills. These separate skills, and therefore two loads, require different qualities from the athlete, from a skill level and from a physical level. And we technically need to train both. So if we train both, we need to spend a bit of time around these particular intensities so we can get better at these skills, but at the same time give the athlete a chance to adapt to them. Some maximal intensities are great for developing skill and also for developing certain physical qualities. But they're very different compared to the physical qualities and skills that you develop when you're lifting near maximal weights. And if your particular sport requires those specific skill and physical adaptations, we better practice them. To finish off this video, I've included a conversation that I had with Rob Palmer, who is a powerlifting coach, who explains how he programs different levels of intensities to train different skill sets in the powerlifting lifts. But before we go and view that conversation, I just want to tell you about my new book, The Science of Hybrid Training, available from Amazon. If you want to learn more about how to develop strength and endurance simultaneously, then you need this book. In this book, I detail the different physiological mechanisms which may cause an interference effect and actually go into detail as to why the interference effect may not be as important as we originally thought. At the end of this book, I provide loads of practical ideas about how you can structure your training program so you can maximize your performance for your next hybrid challenge. So if you haven't purchased this book yet, make sure you head over to Amazon to get your copy. And if you have and you like it, please head to Amazon also to give us a review. The reviews are really, really helpful.
If I was to ask you what technique work is, what percentage is technique work performed at?
Oh, well, I guess my philosophy that technique work needs to be across a large spectrum of weights.
Damn you!
Because if you
yeah, so that's it, isn't it? So
as soon as you increase the intensity, the skill changes.
Exactly.
So you then got to practice the skill with that.
Yeah, and then you've got the.
I should have answered 70%.
Well, I was hoping you were going to say like
seem to go
50%, and I'll be like, no, you're wrong. So so that full spectrum of the skill is expressed over the full spectrum, isn't it? It's very easy. It's very easy to express perfect skill execution at 50%. It gets increasingly harder as the intensity goes up. So I had a sort of moment after that where I tried to develop some ideas and thoughts around how you use and whether this, I only say this because Dan Cleather would not be happy with me talking about constraints the way I'm going to talk about constraints. So don't show him this video. But use like a constraints philosophy and it's very much based on, you look at the West Side stuff and you look at, there's obviously a physiological aspect to using bands, chains, pauses, all that kind of stuff. There's obviously there is a physiological part of that. You're changing the function, the neuromuscular function of the muscle, but it also is incredibly useful at certain percentages to challenge the skill of the lift.